Hey everybody, this is Joe from HomeStudioCorner.com. Today I want to talk to you about getting it right at the source again, this time specifically about using EQ to help you get it right at the source. I've talked about in the past how important it is to get the mic placement right, to pick the right microphone, and to also make sure your source itself is sounding right and has the right tone that you need for the song. But there's also a great tool called EQ that you can use on the way in, meaning you EQ the signal before it ever gets recorded. Now, you might be scared of this and might think it's not for you, and that's totally fine, but I want to show you a very simple, practical way that I started doing this recently. You'll see on the screen here, I've got the PreSonus Eureka. This is a preamp I've been using for a couple years now. I really like it. It's about $500, and it's got a good sound to it. It's very versatile, and you can see my review of it on my website. I did a review talking about all the different sections. But we're going to hone in on this section right here. This is where they have a 3-band EQ. Now, if you're not familiar with what a channel strip does, a channel strip is essentially a microphone preamp. You plug your microphone or your bass or your guitar into, and it also has EQ and or compression. In our case, the Eureka has an EQ section, and then it has a compressor section, and then it has the EQ section that you see on the screen here. Now, I'm actually going to adjust the preamp itself. You can't see me do it because it's off in the rack and the camera doesn't reach over here, but I'm going to do it so you can hear the difference, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting. So as you know, I do a lot of videos and a lot of podcasts, and that involves me sitting in front of my Shure SM7 microphone and recording a lot of voiceover stuff. And I started to realize that whenever, especially with podcasts, when I would go to mix the podcast down, I would end up using EQ on my voice, obviously, but I would usually almost always end up doing a boost up in the higher end, around maybe 8 kilohertz or so. Just a little bit of a boost there to add some presence because it is a dynamic microphone, doesn't have a lot of top end to it, and it's just a nice, pleasant, extra high end there. And so probably after a couple of years of doing this, I realized, you know what? I've got a channel strip with EQ on it. Why don't I record that high EQ boost on the way in? And so I already had a little bit of EQ rolling off some of the mid-range that usually comes up and is a problem in the recordings. So that's always been there. But I reached for this high knob there, the gain knob and the frequency. So set it to around, let me take a look. Yeah, I set it to around 12K and a nice wide Q on it. And then I just boosted it by a few dB. So I'm going to turn it down. And this is the original setting. So this is how the preamp sounds with the EQ I had on there with no high boost at all. It sounds fine, it sounds great, but it doesn't quite have that top-end presence that I was wanting, that I ended up adding in the mix anyway. So since I was having to do that in every mix, it makes sense to get it right at the source with EQ. So now I'm going to turn this knob up about 3 or 4 dB, and you'll hear the difference. So I'm talking here, and I'm turning the knob, and I'm going up a little bit, and now you hear it's just got a little bit extra presence and top end to it. It's not harsh. I didn't do a huge boost, just a little bit to add a little bit more air and clarity to the vocal. And now, when I mix my podcast, I do a lot less EQing, especially in the high end, because it already sounds like I want it to sound. So that's a very specific example. You can start by using, if you get a channel strip, use it just on vocals and do something very subtle like that. If it needs a little top end boost or needs a little bit of the low end taken out, do something really subtle. Don't try to do crazy mixing stuff. If you're having to do a lot of crazy EQing, you might not have the microphone in the right place, or you might not be using the right microphone. But if you do have all those things in place, then yeah, it makes sense to use the EQ in subtle ways to make your job easier on the back end when you're mixing. All right, there's another example of how to get it right at the source. I'm Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.